Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone. Welcome to the AllPaths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We're your hosts, Emily and Kate from the nonprofit organization AllPaths Family Building. And today we're going to have a slightly different conversation that's all about advocacy. Now, our listeners know that we've had some really amazing fertility and family building advocates on this show to talk about their own journeys and their experience as advocates in this space. But today we are going to do a deep dive into how you can get involved as an advocate if you've never done anything like this before.
I'm so happy we're talking about this. Obviously, this topic is very close to my heart, and specifically people, which we do hear from all the time, that say, like, I want to do this. I want to advocate. I want to share my story. I want to help, but I don't know how, and I'm scared or whatever. And I love to kind of like help people navigate that, because I think the thing then I hear all the time is it isn't as scary or hard as I thought it was going to be. And I love to hear that. It also, I truly believe, makes a difference. So I'm so happy we're talking about this. And like you mentioned, we have had incredible guests throughout this podcast, including many people who advocacy is now part of their life and sometimes their work as well. But we all started somewhere. Everyone who feels like a quote unquote seasoned advocate now started in the place we're talking about today, which is like, where do I even start?
100%. And I mean, as someone who was relatively new to advocacy work a few years ago, it was scary. I'm not going to lie.
Exactly. Even me. I mean, I have worked in government. My first job out of college was at the Massachusetts State House, and I worked there for 3 years, and it was amazing, and I learned so much. But even me, even having had that experience, I remember I was nervous before my first federal advocacy day because I hadn't done as much federal advocacy. And I also felt like, oh no, am I going to understand like the issues? I have my own personal story, but am I going to understand like the bills that we're going to talk about? So I remember being so nervous of that. I also, in those 3 years I worked at the State House, I never actually testified. I was always the person on the other side, like helping people testify or listening to testimony, but never testifying. And I remember the first time I ever personally testified at the State House, I was so nervous.
Yeah. So I feel like those are the two main areas that people really get hung up on. And I know I got hung up on, but like, how do you make sure you're knowledgeable enough about the bills to actually talk about them and answer questions? And then B, how do you share your story in a way that's authentic and impactful? So maybe let's start with part A. Where do you even learn about the bills that are up for a vote in your state and the opportunities that exist for advocacy work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And fortunately, like we say for a lot of different things at AllPaths, you are not alone in doing any of this. And that is part of what I hope is very comforting, is like, you don't have to just be kind of out there on your own wondering what is going on. There are definitely resources, including ours, that we want to be helpful to you. And before I get into that, I'll just take a step back, that to me, it really is starting with a little bit of like, kind of like government 101 or advocacy 101, which is just that obviously there are all different levels of government. Your local government, which might be your town council or your city council or your board your select board, they call it in a lot of towns now. So you kind of have your local municipal government, and then you have state level government, and then federal are the kind of main levels. And at AllPaths, we really focus a lot on state. So today I'm going to focus on that, but a lot of it is relevant for those other tiers as well. So I just wanted to say that. And to me, like your very, very first step, like your homework after you listen to this podcast, which is pretty easy and I think kind of fun homework, is to figure out who your own elected officials are. And again, fortunately, there are great resources, which we'll put in the show notes for this episode, of how to find those. They're literally, you go to that website, you enter your home address, and it usually gives you a full listing of all your elected officials, usually at all of those levels. And when you click on each one of their names, usually then it opens up their contact information. So to me, that's the beginning. Who represents you? Because you know what? That is who you as an individual have the most power with. You're a voter. And honestly, even people that don't vote, you mean something to them because you are a person in their district who knows other people in their district. And the kind of ripple effect of that is big. So they care when they hear from you. And I also think your power with a certain elected official is comparable to like their level of government. So I feel like when you contact like your local officials in your own town, that is really meaningful because you are in their town that they represent and they really care about that. And also at the state level, especially like your state. So at the state level, typically you have one state representative and one state senator. Again, it varies by state, but generally speaking, there's kind of like usually two bodies that are part of your state legislature, and you have at least one person who represents you in either of those. In some states, they have more, which always throws me for a loop. Like I think New Hampshire, you have like multiple reps, but then usually one senator. So there's slight differences, but generally speaking, you will always have at least one and one. And at the state level, I have found they really do appreciate you reaching out to them. You are their constituents, you are their voters, and that is so important. And so, especially, I think they just get much less volume of calls and emails and letters than your federal officials. So I think it can be a little hard to get noticed at the federal level, frankly, with your advocacy. So that's part of why I have always really focused on the state level, because I feel like grassroots advocacy at the state level is very impactful. So that's the first step. Figure out who they are. And then to your point around then, what am I even writing to them about and how do I get information about that? Well, so I think we'll just assume that everyone listening, fertility and family building is one of the issues that you're passionate about. And again, I'm not saying this in a self-serving way, but AllPaths, for example, we have websites for each of the 6 New England states because that's the region where we're based, and some information about federal legislation on our website. So if you, for example, live in one of those states, that's a great place to start. Click on that state where you live and look at the bills we're following and tracking in a given legislative session. And other organizations have similar things. Some national organizations have one for every state. So, for example, if you really care about fertility preservation, say you're someone who is a survivor of something like cancer, where fertility preservation was an important part of your story. There's an organization called the Alliance for Fertility Preservation. They have a really cool thing on their website, which I love, which is a map of the entire United States, color coded for which state has current legislation, which state like the bill like has ended for this session, or which state has passed a law, which is great. So those kind of things are great resources where you know the issue you care about, you might just not know the nuance of what you're going to write to a legislator about. And a lot of organizations, including ours, will send something out when there is a specific thing that needs your action. So, for example, this session, we're talking right now in 2025, this session in Vermont, there was a bill about confirmatory adoption, it's called, and we won't get into a lot of detail about that because it's a little bit complex. But it is important. It basically streamlines the process for LGBTQ parents, non-birthing parents, to streamline the process of them adopting their own child. Many states, thankfully, have done this because they realize that the requirements needed to confirm parentage in that way is not as intense as it needs to be to establish an adoption with, with new parents. And so that was up for a vote in Vermont this session. And so we sent out an alert to all of our contacts in Vermont that gave the basic information about the bill, told them where to find who their elected officials were in Vermont, and gave them all the information they needed to take action on that bill. And many people did. So people wrote back to us that live in Vermont and said, yes, I want to be involved in this bill that this impacts me directly. And then they had all the tools to then contact their own legislator about that. And I think one of them even submitted testimony to the committee that was considering that bill. And that bill did become law, which is awesome this session.
Yeah.
So, yes, because I think that is a big source of the anxiety is I don't know what to say. And I don't know even like what the issues are. I mean, some states, well, all the states really, you can search by keywords for what legislation exists. So that is an option as well. But typically, so like you can literally search by infertility or fertility and just see what bills come up in your state. Sometimes that can be really interesting to do. But again, most people, you will not have to do that because in the issue area that you care about, you will have support and information in doing this. You will not be doing this alone. So you really don't have to do that. There will be other easier resources. And then it kind of relates to your second question about sharing your story. The great news as well is that you don't really need the details of bills or honestly, and this is like hot take, there doesn't even need to be a bill. Personally, I am a big fan and a big believer in the fact that part of this is building relationships with your own representative and senator at the state level. And that's why I said how that to me is the first step is figuring out who those people are. And then it'll be so interesting to you because I think once you figure out who they are, you actually are going to start running into them. You'll start seeing them like at the grocery store or at, one of our colleagues has a really funny story where she lives on the North Shore and they have those beautiful farms that are like full of sunflowers. And she was at one of those in her district and she ran into her rep and we were working on the Mass Parentage Act. And as she said it, she chased him through the sunflowers to talk to him about the Mass Parentage Act. I am quite confident she did not chase him, or at least if she did, it was in a very friendly way because he did sign on to be a co-sponsor of the Mass Parentage Act after that sunflower conversation.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah, I mean, but that isn't to say, obviously, I'm not saying that if you see them literally standing over the avocados at the grocery store that you're going to talk to them. Because that could be very scary. But I think it's great to just kind of like start to notice that they are, even though we kind of elevate them a little bit sometimes, as they're my state rep, they're my state senator. They also are like the Little League parent in your town and the Little League coach in your town. It's like they're people, of course, just like us. And they're very used to being recognized. They're very used to being talked to. And to me, it's a lot about building a relationship with them. There's a lot of ways to stay in touch with them. A lot of them have e-newsletters. So I suggest signing up for those. A lot of them do district times where you don't have to go to the state house to see them. They're at the coffee shop in your town, or they are doing an office hour, somewhere in your district. And again, you can go to those without an agenda. In fact, they love it. So literally, like my state rep from the neighborhood I used to grow up in, he used to hold them at the coffee shop that's like iconic in Mission Hill, called Mike's Donuts. If you know, you know. Mike's Donuts is like a meeting spot. He used to do them there. So, for example, whatever the Mike's Donuts is at your district where your state rep is doing his or her district hours, you go to that, you sit down with them, you say, I am Kate LeBlanc, I live in your district, and I'm so happy to meet you. I am happy you're my state rep. And I really just wanted to come and share with you that infertility and fertility struggles are my biggest issue that I care about because we struggled to become parents. We wanted to be parents and we had to do IVF to become parents. And so it is the biggest issue that I will be looking to you to see where you vote on the issues that I care about. And that's it. And I am so confident. I mean, we are, and again, I'm using Massachusetts a little bit as an example because I know it the best personally. But obviously, AllPaths welcomes people from all over the country, and we do advocacy in all six New England states. Even in the states that are maybe a little bit more challenging on our issues because of people's different stances on personhood and things like that, in my experience, you will almost always get a warm reaction. I'm not saying you will agree on every issue by any means, unfortunately. Oh, if only that were the case. But in my experience, you will get a warm reaction. So to me, especially if you come and you just very briefly share your story, like I just did, I think a lot of people feel like they have to go into detail. It took us 3 years. These are the things we did. You can do that. But in my experience, you do not have to do that. And a lot of elected officials, not all, but a lot of them are parents. If you tell them it was your dream to be parents and it was a longer, bumpier road than you had ever envisioned, and that especially if you faced barriers to care because of lack of insurance or lack of resources in your area, lack of care in your area, those are the things they need to hear. You do not need to go into crazy detail about what an egg retrieval is or what your embryo situation was. You can stay very high level. So it really does not need to be perfect, and it really does make a difference.
Oh, that's really great. And it's much less scary when you kind of have those parameters around it. Like, this is very general. This is who I am. This is why I care about this particular topic. Thank you so much for listening. It's a
Exactly.
lot less scary.
Yes, it is. But all of us, we want to feel armed with the information. We don't want to seem like we don't know what we're talking about or
Mhm.
um and again,
I,
like I feel like that's what I was nervous about with
mhm.
Federal Advocacy Day and other things. But to me, for one, it's just a human thing that we always want to, and of course, no one wants to feel ignorant. But at the same time, we don't have to be experts. They know you are a concerned citizen, not a paid lobbyist. And that's better. I mean, in this context, they love to hear from actual people in their district about what they care about. And like I said, I actually think they love it when you're just coming to generally share an issue you care about. They get so many specific requests about bills. And we do that too, which we're going to talk about. We do that also, which has value. But sometimes, like, you don't have to wait for there to be a bill that's exactly in your wheelhouse of what you care about to go to one of those office hours or to write them a message because they just need to know what's on your heart and mind.
I love that. And I wish to that. I had known that a million years ago. I remember cramming the night before I ever first gave testimony because I was like, what if they ask me questions? Like, I need to know everything that has ever been written about this topic and this bill. And I was terrified. Like, I have, like, worst case scenario, they're gonna be like, well, what about this? I'm gonna be like, oh, well,
Yeah.
what about that? Oh
But
yeah, it was
the same thing is
that
like,
never
well,
happened.
they probably didn't ask you questions. One,
No,
a lot of
no.
times, like if you're testifying or if you're doing a meeting on Zoom or in person at the State House, they often don't ask questions, or if they do, they're ones you could handle for sure with minimal prep. Um, and the other like magical thing that I just want to say to people is it is a perfectly appropriate response to say, "Oh, interesting question. I don't know the answer to that, but I will get back to you." Not only is that more than okay, and again, human, we do not know everything, nor should we. It's actually a great opportunity then. They have
Mhm.
actually given you a perfect way to circle back to them with the answer, but you don't have to be an expert.
Yeah, that's, I want to like underline, highlight, circle that for anybody who is like me and was terrified when they were first starting out.
I
advocating,
know.
being like,
Yeah,
you don't have to have all the answers to all the things. Just being you and sharing your story is definitely more than enough.
100%. And I've actually been in meetings where I can tell the person is dealing with that awkwardness of not feeling like they know the answer and kind of trying to answer it and not lie, but like try to kind of like fill in the gap. And just to me, it's so much better, obviously, and calmer for your spirit to just take a breath and and that's why you find so many people say, like, oh, like, that's a good question, or that's an interesting question. Because to me, that's a lot of people, myself included, it's way of a little bit taking the pause and
Mm-hmm.
then saying, I don't have the answer to that, but I'll get back to you. So much better than freelancing.
Oh, 100%. So that's a really approachable, not scary way to get in touch with your reps, whether it's, you know, at Mike's Donuts or somewhere else out in the community. What about if you are testifying in front of a committee? How does that process work, and how is that a little bit different?
Yeah, definitely. And to me, like again, even me, I've worked in this field for over 25 years, but I don't think I have ever in my life gone to the state house totally solo to testify. To People do it all the time, and I mean it is incredible. And if you feel like empowered to do that and comfortable doing that, that is amazing. And you're more than welcome to do that for sure. I mean, that is in the case of whatever state house, that is your house. Your state house in your state is your house. So feel free to do that. But in my experience, you do not need to testify alone. And it is so great to be part of a broader effort. So my advice is again, like whatever your not just your kind of overall cause, but very specifically if there's something you care about, regarding, in our case, fertility and family building. Like I said, if you're listening to this podcast, you of course care about fertility and family building, and it's likely one of the most important issues you care about. But even within that, say you very specifically care the most about pregnancy loss. That's been important in your own journey, in your own story, or for someone you love. You can turn to, again, I mentioned our website, but turn to us, ourselves, write to us and say, I care about pregnancy loss specifically and would love to advocate about that specifically. And we will then help you figure out what bills in your state are specifically relevant to pregnancy loss this session, and when is it going to have its committee hearing? Is there the opportunity to testify? And we can help prepare you to testify. So, and I'm not just highlighting ourselves, like there's a lot of groups like that. Like we partner with groups focused on maternal mental health, for example, which is so important. Those groups do an amazing job of connecting people to the information they need to know how to testify. So you don't have to go it alone. But also, it's great. Like each state's legislature has websites with really helpful information. So they will have information about upcoming hearings and what you need to know to sign up to testify, either virtually, in person, or in writing. So that information is there. And again, people can do it on their own, but they don't have to, which is so nice. And and there's a lot of ways to testify. I mean, not every state still has a virtual testifying option. I wish they did, but I know like Connecticut and Massachusetts still do, which is really great for access, and things like that. And so like going there in person is an option, but not the only option. And even those states that don't have a virtual option anymore, you can always submit written testimony. And that is reviewed by the committee. So I never want people to feel like that's somehow not significant or meaningful, because it really is.
That's good to know. I think it can definitely seem like there are kind of layers of importance or weight that is attributed to certain types of testimony. So if you can't get there in person, or if you can't make the hearing that day for scheduling reasons or whatever, it's nice to know that the written piece isn't discounted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, in-person testimony, I will say, is very powerful. And especially when people come and share their own personal story, you can see the impact that it has on the committee. And so that's a very meaningful, I feel like, exchange of advocacy in the sense that you get that kind of real-time reaction and it's great. But yes, I couldn't agree more. Like I just want people to know like whatever it is, written testimony, contacting your own legislator, it all really does make a difference and they really do pay attention to it. They have staff in many cases that read those things and flag really powerful messages for them. And you don't always get a response or you don't always get a personalized response, and that's okay. I wish everyone would, and sometimes you do, but honestly just know that even if you don't get a response, it really does make a difference. One thing that like I personally and we at AllPaths don't recommend are kind of just these form letters that you might see that I think especially at the federal level, I think there is some power in volume. And sometimes form letters like that are the easiest way to show the volume of people that care about an issue. So I'm not saying that kind of advocacy doesn't have its place. It does. But to me, at the state level, even if you use a tool like that, so some people may have seen that there are these online tools where you can enter your home address. There's a pre-populated message and then you just
Mm.
click send and it is awesome. And to me it's like I don't necessarily think those do harm. And so if you're not going to do anything else and you only do that, I would say better to do that than nothing. But to me, there are ways to just slightly make it a minute or two longer and so much more impactful. That is, even when I use those tools, and I do, I personalize the pre-populated message. There's almost always a way where you can change the opening or you can change the middle or both. You can add your own personal take of why you care about this issue. That gets it noticed so much more. Because otherwise, if they get 10 of the exact same message, they might count them up or whatever, but they don't actually make an impact. But if you just personalize those, it really does make a difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. The individual stories are the things that are going to stick in people's minds. They're not going to remember a stat necessarily that everybody, included in their pre-populated email, but they're going to remember
Exactly.
hearing about your individual journey.
Yeah. Well, I just want to share a story that you will particularly appreciate, Emily, as a powerful, impactful preemie mom. So when I worked at Children's Hospital in Boston, I worked in the advocacy department and we were trying to get them to really like without you can't bring preemies to the state house, obviously. We were
Nope.
trying to get no, not a good place for them to be.
Nope.
But we wanted them to see the uniqueness of these babies and their parents. And so we actually attached to our fact sheet with the information about our bill one of the preemie diapers, which is like so
Oh,
tiny, one of the, like the preemie Pampers,
but
basically,
yeah,
that is so tiny.
the little micro ones.
Yes, like the little micro, some of them had to be bought at like specialty.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, you have to special
for,
order them.
yeah, and when we first came up with the idea, I think people were like, "Oh, is that weird? It's like a pamper. Obviously, it was clean, but like this is weird. Like this is weird. Why are we putting a diaper on a fact sheet?" But then a lot of times we were delivering these during meetings and people would like hold it in their hand and be like, oh my God. And it like really stuck with them. And so then there was a debate on the floor of the Senate in Massachusetts. And one of the senators was talking about Children's Hospital and about how pediatric medicine is different. It can't be just like put in with overall adult medicine in the same context. She took the diaper and held it up on the Senate floor.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
we were like watching the debate on TV at the hospital and we like screamed, we're like, she's diapers. Because it was like, you wonder if these ideas are crazy. And I mean, so that was a very physical, tangible example. But I've also seen people bring up a story they heard. We just, earlier last month had a very powerful testimony, very powerful hearing rather about endometriosis. And those are the kind of stories where I know they're going to remember those people. And often then we'll be at a hearing and they will mention it again. They will say, remember that person who was on the floor once a month of the office of their school nurse. And they will reference that again. They will remember like a story like that, and it will change their frame of reference of an issue. So it is really, your story is your most powerful currency.
I love that. And I love the diaper story too.
It was amazing.
That's wonderful. So, as we mentioned, we're recording this in 2025. The legislative session has already ended for this year. What comes next if somebody wants to get involved in the next session?
Well, in some states it's ended. And like in a state like Massachusetts, we actually go for ongoing for like a year and a half, almost 2 years. So again, it's the beginning is really just learning like what is it in my own state? Like how does it work? But you're right. In most legislatures, they have met for this year and are done. And but again, this is a great time to build those relationships. You're going to see them out and about, and I think it is easier, in my opinion, to like talk to them when you're at something where they expect to be talked to, like a town meeting or one of those office hours. You may not want to quote unquote bother them at the grocery store, even though honestly, they are used to that. So if you politely do that, that is fine. But I find it's easier to do that at some regularly scheduled thing where they expect to be contacted. And so that would be my suggestion of what to do in the kind of off season between active legislative sessions. It's also great to write to them to just say thank you. If you see something, and again, we're happy to help with this. Like if you find out who your legislator is and you want to build a relationship with me, write to me and tell me who they are and be like, what do you know about this person? Is this person on an important committee that matters to fertility, or is this person a co-sponsor of a bill that we care about, or are they not yet a co-sponsor of one of the bills we care about? And I can help give you kind of like the thing that you want to ask them about or tell them
That's
about.
perfect.
But like, for example, in Connecticut, I don't want to all be about Massachusetts. In Connecticut, there's a representative named Jillian Gilchrist who is leading an endometriosis working group there, which has been incredible. And she's doing this like it's not mandated. She did this as like out of her own
She's awesome.
commitment to the issue. And so like if you find out like you live in her district and you care about endometriosis, you can write to her and just say, like, thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. And obviously, who doesn't like to be thanked? Those are like the best emails they ever get. You're not asking for anything, you're just thanking them. And that's like a big, obvious example because she has been such a leader on that issue. But like similarly, it could be something smaller. Like I said, confirmatory adoption passed in Vermont. And I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty confident it was like unanimous or close to it. So like if you care about that issue, you can find who is your senator in Vermont and write to them and say, "Thank you so much for voting to approve that bill because it's really going to make a difference for my family. I might have otherwise had to pay a lot for a complex adoption of my own child."
I love that. And that's such a great, easy, low stress way to start building that relationship so that when the next session, or if you're in a state that has a 2 year session starts up again in January of 2026, they know you know them, you're ready to kind of kick it into high gear with whatever legislation is being presented.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if this conversation today has helped convince you that advocacy is not the big scary thing that you might have built it up to be in your head, and B, that you don't have to do this alone, how can people get in touch with us to start using their voice or to help with the fertility and family building advocacy that we do?
I love it. Well, and hopefully we have done that today. So yes, our website is a resource. The advocacy pages are very easy to navigate to from our homepage, but also please reach out to us. Our email address is admin@allpathsfb.org. That is the best way to wave your flag. I'm interested in advocacy. I live in this state. How can I get involved? And then we'll get back to you. We love to get those messages.
Absolutely. And this has been so much fun.
This is one of my favorite topics. I feel like demystifying advocacy has to be one of my legacies.
Well, you have a lot. We'll add it to the list. So we know this episode is airing on December 31st. So we just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that this time of year can be really tricky if you're part of this community. It can be a time when a lot of people are looking forward to the new year, being really excited about what's to come. But if the year that is ending didn't look like what you had expected, that can be really hard. So we just wanted to say that we see you. We're here for you today and every day of the year.
Yes, thank you so much, Emily, for saying that. And I also wanted to just take a moment that today is also the last day of our year-end fundraising campaign, and particularly of an incredible $25,000 match that we had this year-end season, which was so kind and generous of wonderful donors of ours. So if people have not made their donation yet, please, you still have time. But also, of course, each and every donation, whenever it comes in the year, is so appreciated by us. We are small but mighty. So truly, when we say every donation makes a difference, it really does. And we're just so grateful to our community for how generously they support us all throughout the year. So thank you. And thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at AllPathsFB or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support who are vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone struggling to grow their families. Today, we want to recognize and thank the Center for Advanced Reproductive Services, a FIRST fertility center. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.